Like,
I mean, because
because
all the stats
yeah,
show the more diverse your team is, the more profit you make.
sure, yeah,
And
right,
no one disputes that.
yep,
Everyone agrees to it, but still, like,
yeah,
I might make this up. I think last year, like in the Bay Area, um, VC investment in black companies went from like 3% to 0.5%,
hmm
like something like that, right?
hmm
And it's like mind-boggling, right? That's in a business case, right? Yeah, to me, like you don't believe in diversity at all, right? You don't care
hmm
about it, but that's in a business case. You think more people would invest in
You
it, right?
should, right? But like think of the average CEO or like even a small medium sized business owner. It's like I've been doing this for a while and things have been working. You're asking me to change a process
That
that's
works for
worked so
you.
far
Yeah.
for me, right? And it's unfortunately something that like I see a lot of business owners or executives agree with. Like they acknowledge like there are hard facts, like you mentioned, right? Like diverse companies perform better. Period. Right. Um, but there. I think it's the challenge of the work that it takes to become diverse that companies generally aren't really willing to invest in fully.
This was
Right.
crazy to me, right? I can't remember the name of the VC firm, but they had on their website, we want to increase the diverse, investment. We want to talk to more people.
Mhm.
I'm paraphrasing, like we want to invest in more diverse companies, more diverse people.
Mhm.
And then it says, um, we don't take cold emails. You need an introduction. Like, make it make sense.
Sure. Right.
Make it
Right.
make sense.
right. Right.
Make that make
So
sense
if
for
you aren't
me.
already part of our network, you're not in, but
Yeah.
we want to become more diverse,
Yeah.
right? I think it's like the fact that you're saying that you want to become more diverse acknowledges that you have a diversity problem,
Yeah.
right? But then saying that the only way in is to be part of our network means that you're not willing
Yeah.
to
So,
identify
so
or
basically
justify.
saying we have open door policy,
That's interesting.
but the
Yeah.
door's always closed.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but I think that's a good example, right? Like it's like companies have a hard time like moving on to new practices, right? Like that's something that they probably already had. Like,
Yeah.
well, you need to like introduction, like that's part of the core of who we are,
Yeah.
right? Like, but at the same time, like, yeah, we've acknowledged we have a diversity problem. We want to change that, but like this is an area that we're not going to change. Well, like, okay, like you said, make that make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me ask you this question, right?
yeah,
So let's suppose there's two scenarios, right? Suppose you're a startup founder, right?
sure.
And you really want your let's say change that. Say you're a Hispanic female, right?
hmm
You have three Hispanic female friends, like really good at what you need to do, right?
hmm
Marketing, sales, tech, whatever. And the easy thing to do, be like hire these other, like bring on these other two or three Hispanic females to start your company, right?
hmm
So you do that and make the company successful at first, and then bring diversity on, or do you like do diversity from the beginning and maybe find people that maybe not as qualified, and because you're finding people who are not qualified, it takes you long to build a company. Like, what do you
Uh,
think? What's the things people should do?
I think one, you got to be if you want to be a diverse company in the future, you got to care about diversity from the very beginning,
Mm.
right? Like, I mean, you got to think, um, you got to operate through that lens. I don't think it's hard to become diverse in environments that aren't naturally diverse without a significant element of intentionality. And you've got to be intentional a lot of the stuff that you do, right? Like the scenario that you just laid out. I mean, I think that's tough, right? It's kind of case by case basis, right? Like if you've got three qualified Hispanic women for the job, then bring them on, right? Um, right. I mean, I think that, and I guess diversity is subjective to, for me at least, the communities that you operate within, right? Like I always like to say, companies should be as diverse as the communities that they intend to serve or the communities that they operate within, right? Um, if you look at internal employee demographics and they don't match the areas that you came
Yeah,
from, like
yeah.
then maybe there's a problem, right?
Like how many companies say, "Man, we need to sell to Asian men over 55,"
Sure.
but there's no one in the company in that
That's
demographic.
a 55 or older Asian male, right?
Mhm.
Like you're like, how do you know what that demographic wants if you have nobody in the company that's designing for that demographic, right? Yeah, it's I don't know. It's there are. I mean, this is not to let companies off the hook. There are systemic issues at play, right? Like, and I think there's always going to be diversity, equity, equality pushback,
Yeah.
right? And oftentimes it is that DEI is racist or reverse racism, right? One, that's not just about race. DEI is never just about race. But the realities are, the argument oftentimes is like, oh, take the most qualified person for the job, right? Which is, bottom line, makes sense. It's a very elementary, basic argument, but how do we define what is qualified, right?
Yeah,
And
with that,
do
I'm
we
a
look
firm
at like
I'm a firm
education?
believer that you can find the best qualified person across the various demographics, various big different things, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you also have to consider there are a lot of individuals from various communities that have never really had the opportunity or haven't had a clear path to the opportunity
Yeah.
to make themselves qualified by your definition of qualified, right? Right, like it's baseline qualification that they have to have a degree from a prestigious university. Okay, cool. Like, how many people actually have a true clear path to that kind of education,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, again, like there are a lot of systemic issues that exist, that can be that act as disqualifiers for individuals that, like, if you're saying we're going to hire the most qualified individual, right? Again, how do you define qualified,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of roles that I've seen within tech companies, sales as an example, right? Where there's these tech companies that say you got to have a college degree in order to get an interview.
You
Do
don't
you?
need
Do
a
you?
fucking sales.
For sales? Do
Yeah,
you?
no.
Do you? Like, no. Like, you need
No.
somebody with a little bit of grit and a little bit of fucking
Yeah.
hustle, right? Like somebody that can kind of
Some
adapt
mental
on the fly, right?
toughness.
Like mental toughness. And like, where do you find that from? You don't necessarily find that from somebody who's been handheld from
Yeah.
middle school, high school to college and has graduated and is now ready for a job, right? Like, that's not necessarily the person that's going to be best for the job.